Welcome into episode 512 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian D. Felice, joined by Bridget Peru and Scott McLaughlin. The Boston Bruins got a 4-1 victory over the Utah Mammoth last night at TD Garden. They improved to 20-14-0 on the season. We're going to get to our opening shifts. Before we do that, I just want to quickly plug that we have a guest interview later on in this episode. Mike Commito, he's the author of Bruins 365, Habs 365, Leafs 365, Hockey 365. And if you're not catching on to the reference here, it's 365. And, his books are basically, the most monumental moment from every single day in the calendar regarding the subject matter. So that is going to be the case with the Bruins 365 book that he just recently published. And so if you're a reader, then you definitely want to get your hands on that. And it's interesting too, Bridget and Scott, because Mike, as listeners will find out, he grew up a Maple Leafs fan. So it's kind of like a learned history for him to go over the Bruins despite knowing about them in the first place, but it was a fun interview and we can definitely get into that stuff too.
Yeah, and he has some opinions on the Carlo trade, so.
We didn't ask him, this is kind of, teasing a little bit. We didn't get to ask him about his specific reaction to 2013. I was going to ask if he was a Maple Leaf square, but I didn't want to upset him. There was no need for that, right? We're trying to keep it friendly. But it's a very good listen, and yeah, so you guys will enjoy that.
Yeah, it was great. It's definitely a book right up my alley as someone who, if people have listened long enough, know I'm also a history nerd, especially when it comes to sports and the Bruins. So his stories stretch, not just every day of the year, but across the whole 100+ year history of the team. Mm-hmm. So but yeah, we'll get to that. Let's start with this year's Bruins and December 16th, because that is when they beat the Utah Mammoth 4-1.
Is that gonna be the book?
I don't know if it made the cut. Yeah, maybe.
Wait. It's gonna make the cut. All right, it's gonna make the cut because the Bruins also signed defenseman Vladislav Kolyachonok.
Bridget, I told you how to say this, and just not gonna get it.
It's gonna make the book. Okay.
Kolyachonok.
I was close. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll do my opening shift first though, and that's so at morning skate, Charlie McAvoy, when he was coming back from his injury, made a couple comments about how much fun it looked like the Bruins were having and how he wanted to get back in there. And we've heard that from a couple other players. Mark Kaslik said it's really fun coming to the rink every day. So I asked McAvoy, look, obviously winning some games helps with that, right? Last season was not very fun for anyone. I asked him what else had to change to make this fun again. And I thought his answer was pretty interesting. I know it's already gotten some play on sports radio. He said, I don't want to take a shot at last year or anything because there's a lot of guys that aren't here anymore that I love deeply. But I think the chemistry this year, it feels a little different. He added, we were able to sort of water that seed a little more and went into how last year it just kind of felt like they didn't have a chance to really bond as a team. They had to start on the road. They had, a disrupted training camp, disjointed. And he said, before we know it, Monty was fired. But this year it's just been a little different. We were able to kind of learn from the mistakes of last year and find a way to get this team as cohesive, as close as we can. And I think that it's helped us in this first half a lot. So, to me, it kind of touches on something that we've talked about before, which is it just felt like last year's team never really came together. And if people want to try to blame that on Brad Marchand or guys who aren't here or Jim Montgomery, fine. You can try to single someone out. I think it was just team wide. I think it was just too many people on different pages and it just never really came together. And sometimes that happens. But I think it's a credit, again, we'll see where it ultimately gets them this year, right? There's a long ways to go. Marcus Sturm himself said chemistry doesn't guarantee that you win games. But I do think you have to give some credit to this year's leaders, the players, McAvoy, Pastrnak, Zadorov, both Lindholms, and to to Sturm and the coaching staff on making sure that that was part of their preparation for this season and not something that kind of just got pushed off to the side or, ignored in favor of all the X's and O's of systems and all that stuff, which is also equally important when you have a new coach. But they clearly made this, bonding and chemistry a priority.
Yeah, and Mittelstadt talked about it after the game too. I feel like I've heard over the last few weeks a lot of nods from players giving credit to Sturm. And so I'll just read the Mittelstadt quote too, because it's definitely related. And then Brian, you can go to your opening shift. He said, I believe this was your question, Scott. You asked him about what's the difference in how it felt when he came to the team at the end of last year after they sold, like what that vibe was compared to what the team feels right now. And he said, I think as a team, I think we've really found an identity. I think last year when I got here, we lost a lot of guys who were really key people in the room and key people on the ice. And I think maybe we lacked a little bit of an identity. But, Marco has come in firm and strong on that. And I think the way he wants to play fits the personnel that we have.
I think simply put, it just grew stale last year. Grew stale. And all the reason you guys mentioned and Scott, you listed out, it grew stale and it led to underperformances, right? I mean, look at Brad Marchand right now. It's easy to look at the Brad Marchand trade now and say, what the hell are the Bruins doing trading him? And he's over a point per game player for Florida. And it's, by the way, it's a Florida team that's been without Barkov and Tkachuk. So it's not like he's on the Globetrotters. Like they're a good team still, obviously, but it's not like he has this all-star cast around him every night. In Boston last year, he was on pace for like 65 points. I mean, that was fine. Like, that was still fine for, a top 3-4 scorer on a team, but everybody was underperforming last year. Everybody outside of David Pastrnak and obviously Morgan Geekie, but they were slow to start. So yeah, it grew stale. And speaking of chemistry, fly Bruins, fly, fly Bruins, fly. Scott was asking Marco Sturm about chemistry after the game, and he mentioned that he studied the 2024 Philadelphia Eagles as a case study about chemistry and continuity. Not the marriage I was expecting to hear. No slight to the Philadelphia Eagles of 2024. I just never really thought that they were on some short list of like inspirational locker rooms to study. But hey, Marco, whatever floats your boat. I found that quote to be funny. Bridget tweeted out the video, and that's my opening shift.
He said after that too, he had a follow-up on it. I just posted the first part because he didn't really elaborate too much on the second part, but he said he showed it to the team too. Like he said the first game of the season, he showed whatever this clip was that was inspiring him, like to the locker room before the season.
Well,
Marco, that's Invincible with Mark Wahlberg, actually.
Right. It's actually or the Always Sunny episode, the gang gets invincible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was weird. Like the way he was talking about it sounded like they had some, I don't know, like behind the scenes
footage.
Yeah, it was like it wasn't like a public thing. It was. He was like, Cam Neely got his hands on something, like showed it to me and Don. And it's like, our teams, like these sports teams, like trading, hidden behind the scenes videos and like team meetings or something. I mean, hey, whatever works. Like that Eagles team did win the Super Bowl, but as Brian alluded to, like even in real time was kind of covered. And maybe some of this is just, sports media doing its sports media thing, looking for drama, but they were kind of covered as a team that like almost hated each other, like didn't get along, didn't have great chemistry. It's like you'd always have like AJ Brown complaining about not getting the ball and like reading self-help books on the sideline or something, like all this weird stuff. But, look, whatever works. The Eagles did win the Super Bowl and the Bruins are doing okay right now.
And the Bruins are going to win the Super Bowl this year, so.
Future sports team is going to be watching Bruins behind the beef footage, and it's just going to be Dennis Leary. Tonight, the Bruins played the Montreal Canadiens in Boston. It wasn't the black and whatever. whatever Dennis Leary says in those videos, it's like maybe they get footage from those. I don't know. Maybe the Eagles were in Hard Knocks or something. Who knows?
I think maybe it was just like locker room footage of like a pump up speech or something like that. That's what it seemed like to me, but I don't know how he got it. So that was also a question. I was like, we're not going to dig any further, but like, I don't know where you got this. But anyway, it was funny. It was something that I think every single one of us in the room during the press conference was like, that's interesting. I don't really know where this is coming from, but he had mentioned it apparently to his team. He mentioned it multiple times to staff. So this is something that like he really did learn about and dig into a little bit and I guess use as just a way to maybe apply it to what the way he's coaching the Bruins this year. So what exactly that is, we don't know, but we know that he's trying to take examples from other coaches, other teams on what to do. Anyhow, my opening shift has to do with something David Pastrnak said that immediately I thought of Brian when he was talking about it in the locker room last night. So and it all kind of ties together with, Brian, it all kind of ties together because it's all positive stuff about how the system that Sturm is doing is working, right? Like this is the common theme between all of them. And Pastrnak answered a question about why does he think the Bruins are a good third period team and why are they able to hold on to leads in the third period and to that effect. And he said, we try to wear them down. Obviously the system we're playing when everybody is on the same page, it's not easy to play against. And it reminded me of what you said either last episode or the episode before that, Brian, where you kind of asked more of an abstract question of like, are the Bruins able to get these wins that they've been getting and look better than they did last year, despite maybe on paper, not having the best team, but there's still things that they could add. And you said something like, well, do you think it's because they play just so like they have grinders and they just grind teams down and they wear teams down. And at the end of all of these games, like the other team just doesn't have gas left in the tank. And, the Bruins are the ones with a little bit more juice left. And I actually asked Morgan Geekie about it too. And he agreed. He's like, yeah, we're a well-conditioned team and we have some big guys. And they acknowledge that part of the philosophy and part of the game plan is making the other team by the third period just feel like they don't have anything left. And it comes with being physical and being well-conditioned.
Yeah, it was in response to, Scott was mentioning that the Bruins 5-on-5 advanced analytics like aren't very favorable for them. And so the thought just crossed my mind and it was an unfiltered thought, an unprocessed thought. I just brought it to the class. It was like, I wonder if like the way the Bruins play, I wonder if there's a reason why the Bruins have poor 5-on-5 advanced analytics, but it's not costing them outside of just like, are their oppositions just missing the net? Or is it like, the way the Bruins play shift in, shift out, they wear on teams. And so maybe teams are still getting high danger chances, but they just don't have the required energy to execute the way that they would if they were playing a team that plays a little bit softer in those they're not going for rebounds as hard, or they're not, I don't know. It was just something I raised, and Scott said he thinks it's just, more simply put, like Swayman's one of the best goalies in the world. And I think there's a lot to that as well. It was just something I thought of because it's like, okay, why does a team have poor advanced 5-on-5 analytics, but it's not costing them? That was essentially the prompt in my head. Are the Bruins doing something that you can't quantify in an advanced analytics stat that helps explain, you know what I mean? I was just thinking out loud. And anyway, so yeah.
No, it came up after this game. So like there is definitely something to it.
Well, I don't know if there is. I'm very curious about where this goes because I think there's parts of it that are impressive and there's parts of it that are misleading. So like, here's an impressive part. They are now 16-0-0 when leading after 2 periods this season. I think there's like 7 teams in the NHL that have a perfect record when leading after 2, but those 16 wins are second most behind only Colorado. Colorado is 20-0-0 when leading after 2. So that's impressive. Now, that said, we do also know that there have been games where maybe the game was tied going into the third, Bruins took the lead and then blew it and ended up losing points. Like, that has also happened, but like those don't count into that specific stat. Now, what I really just want to push back on is I think, not necessarily that you guys are doing this, but I think there's like this developing narrative that the Bruins are a dominant third period team, and that 16-0-0 stat would maybe lend itself to that. They're +1 in the third period this season. Like smack middle of the pack. That they're not burying teams. And if you want to look at shot differential, they are 31st in third period shot differential, second worst in the NHL. They're -78 shot differential on the season. It's their worst period in terms of shot difference. So I like, all of my instincts tell me to really be careful with this idea that like the Bruins have figured out how to wear teams down and just suffocate them in the third period. I'm like, they're getting outshot in a lot of third periods, and my analytics brain tells me that that's not sustainable and is bound to break at some point. So I'm just like very skeptical about this right now.
Listen, I don't raise the point I was raising because I wholeheartedly believe it. Like I said, I'm more so just thinking out loud and asking myself this question. So, but Scott, like, I'm not, I guess what I'm asking is, shot generation quantitatively can stay the same. Like you say the Bruins are still getting outshot. Like I guess my question is it possible that the way the Bruins play makes those same amounts of shots maybe just that much less effective, or that is the way that they play, teams might still be getting the same shots on them, like quantitatively, but are they as effective? Are they as dangerous? Is the execution where it otherwise would be if they were playing a team that maybe isn't wearing down? I'm just asking the question. I don't know the answer. You know what I mean? And that's something that advanced stats can't tell us.
And if you're leading, then teams are more likely to kind of just throw pucks on from anywhere. So that, like, there is something to that, but it's just like, it's notable that they are so low. Now I will say all that said, like, they played a great third period Tuesday night. So this is me bringing this up is more just like the bigger picture view.
And they sucked in the first 15 minutes.
Their third period against Utah was excellent. That they went into the third with a 2-1 lead. They extended it to 3-1, then 4-1. Utah only had 5 shots in the third period, so this was not one of those third periods where they got peppered at all. So if they start having more third periods like that and close games out like this, then that is very sustainable. I'm just saying on the season as a whole, like, this has been kind of a more recent development, and it's an encouraging one. I just want to see it for a little longer.
And also, we need to talk about Morgan Geekie again, because he's the reason why. Like, so they get down, and then he scores the next 2 goals, and all of a sudden the confidence is back, and you just feel the rest of the game play out in a way that you felt like the Bruins were in control for most of the rest of that. After he scored that second goal, it really did feel like they were in the driver's seat, and they were able to extend the lead, like you mentioned. But give credit to Geekie, who, once again, when some of the rest of the team wasn't showing up quite yet, they weren't quite settled into the game, he's still there, and he's still ready to finish. And he finishes the first one on the power play, and then he gets him going with the go-ahead goal 23 seconds into the second period. And just from that point on, they were in control. Like, they outshot the Mammoth 8-3 in the second period. It was a great period, and it was all sparked by a first-minute goal by Morgan Geekie to make it 2-1.
Yeah, and the whole wearing teams down narrative was not the case in the first 15 minutes of the game. I mentioned online, I was wondering if the Bruins passed around some melatonin in the locker room pregame, because they were as sluggish as I've seen them all year to start a game. I know they were coming back from a a week-long road trip, and Utah's in the middle of December might not be the biggest game to get up for. But you look at the standings. We talked about the standings last episode. It doesn't matter who you're playing, what night of the week it is, or where it is. Every game is big, not just for the Bruins, but for all the teams in the Eastern Conference. The points are at a premium, more so this year than any other year, because of the standings being so tight. So you cannot, it didn't bite them in the ass, right? I mean, Utah's had their struggles. They're a 500 team. They did get down 1-0 on a power play goal again, another late power play goal in the power play. But you get away with that period, tied 1-1. You kind of feel like you're playing with house money because the Bruins sucked up until that first Geekie power play goal. So they did not wear the Utah Mammoth. I keep wanting to say the Utah Jazz because they were the Utah Hockey Club. I forget what they're called nowadays, but the Utah Mammoth. They didn't wear down Utah. In fact, Utah was all over the Bruins like white on rice for the first 15. But definitely from that first Geekie goal on, I think the Bruins really, really they controlled that game for the most part.
Yeah, and great execution on both of those Geekie goals. First one on the power play, where it's, it gets up to Zacha. He works it down low to Elias Lindholm. And I think everyone in the building is expecting him to, as he takes it to the front, to just jam that, try to sneak it under Vitek Vanacek somehow. And instead passes out, like away from the goal to Pastrnak. And my immediate thought is like overpassing. But no, now Pastrnak has a good shot, and he passes, makes a great seam pass to Geekie, who just has a wide open net. And it's like that. If that goes wrong, if someone mishandles that puck at some point, then we are talking about overpassing. But when you pull it off, it leads to ultimately a really pretty easy goal, with Geekie having a lot of net to shoot at. So, and then once it start the second period, set play off the opening faceoff that they win, ends up with an Elias Lindholm shot. Utah ices it. Now you get an offensive zone faceoff. Again, set play. Elias Lindholm wins the draw. They move it around. Pastrnak loops all the ways around the net, pops out on the left side, throws it to the net with Geekie setting a screen, rebound, Geekie buries it. Like, those were just really well executed plays by just about everyone on the ice touching the puck in both cases.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Also worth mentioning Utah, because I thought they were buzzing in the first, like I said, the first half, better part of the first period. They're without Logan Cooley still. I'm not sure how long he's down for, but he's their top center. Obviously one of their top players. So, they were shorthanded. But again, credit to the Bruins for taking advantage of that. It's, the Bruins, front and center have had massive injury issues all year, and no one's felt bad for them. So it is what it is. But yeah, Scott, the execution of the power play was great. Morgan Geekie up to 24 goals in the year. And yeah, it's that power play, Steve Spott's come in. He's made adjustments for sure in transition in the offensive zone as well. But just the dynamic of the fact that David Pastrnak is no longer on the offside half wall is a huge addition to the Bruins power play in terms of generating looks, because Morgan Geekie now is in that one-timer position. And the fact that the Bruins have somebody in the team that can displace Pastrnak because their one-timer is that deadly, it's an embarrassment of riches now. Obviously, Pastrnak can go over there too and does at times, but you have two just sharpshooters now on either flank. And Pastrnak is more of the playmaker than Geekie. So to have him on his forehand side and coming downhill as a shooting threat and a passing threat, it's just changed the entire dynamic of the power play. A power play that last year when they were healthy to start the year, like Morgan Geekie wasn't on the Bruins' top power play. It would have been a unit of Lindholm, Pastrnak, McAvoy, Marchand, and maybe Zacha. I know Geekie probably got looks in the top unit as the season went on, but it's been a development. So it's the Bruins power play being what it is it's impressive stuff. Top 5, I think, in the league right now. So
yeah, number 5, and like you look at the teams ahead of them, it's like Edmonton. We know all the weapons they have: McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard. Dallas, like, that's a loaded team, one of the best in the NHL. Pittsburgh still got Crosby and Malkin, and you can throw Letang or Carlson out there. Montreal, we know the exciting young talent that team has with Lane Hudson running it, and Demidov, and Suzuki's out there, like
Caulfield.
and then the Bruins, Cole Caulfield, definitely, and then it's the Bruins at 5. Like that's ahead of Ottawa, who's had a good power play for a couple of years. Detroit, who's been near the top of the league for a couple of years. Vegas, who has a ton of talent they can throw out there. Like, that's the group they're in. I also want to say, like, along the lines of the power play, because I think this has probably flown under the radar a little bit. I do think McAvoy's gotten better running it as the quarterback. Like, he's moving more. I think he's opening things up. There's been a bunch of times where, like, just the way he's walking the line and opening up lanes looks much better than previous years where he would just be caught standing still sometimes.
It's worth noting, Scott, because we talked about that, right? We've talked about that ad nauseum at different times during the off season, the beginning of the year, last year, certainly. What happened to McAvoy? Like, he is not. He has the skill set, but he's not executing, running a power play. And do you do Lindholm? Do you do Lohrei? Like, and honestly, when McAvoy was out, I just you noticed the drop off. You noticed and that's because he'd been playing well before he got hurt. But yeah, you're exactly right. We spent enough time on it when he was struggling, and as it goes in, sports radio, sports podcasting, you tend to talk more about things when they're going wrong than when they're going right. But you're absolutely correct to bring him up because he deserves his flowers for stepping up and being the player that he should be and can be running a power play. And I think he's been mindful of getting shots off sooner, which is something that ailed him before. He would hold on to pucks too long, too indecisive. And it's, when you get shots on that, or just when you generate shots in general early on a power play, you get the penalty killers moving and seams open up. When you don't shoot the puck for the first minute and a half, you're making their job easy because they're just standing in the box. And so that's been a nice thing to see.
I think it's also just nice to see that he's kind of picked up where he left off pre getting hit in the face with a slap shot. Like people, some of the older school guys were wondering if having to wear the bubble was going to slow him down, like just your decision making. Like, it takes time to get used to wearing the bubble. Like, it just doesn't seem like the weight loss, which hopefully he's put most of it back on, but like the injury, the weight loss, the not being able to eat solid food, the having to wear a bubble, like, it doesn't really look like it's affecting him all that much. So that's good news for the Bruins. Not only do they get him back, but they get him back at what looks like maybe almost 100% in terms of what he's been able to do so far since he came back. And Pasternak's numbers have been great since he came back too. So how many points does he have now since he came back? I'll pull it up while you guys.
I want to say around at least 10.
Yeah, in what, 4 games? Like,
yeah, he had 7 and 2. Then he had a quiet night against Minnesota, and he had like 2 points last night, so maybe 9 points.
Yeah, 2 assists last night. 4 points against Winnipeg, 3 points against St. Louis. And then none against Minnesota, like you mentioned.
So 9 and 4 games, and it was funny. Like, I maintain that I have incredible jinx powers because
you do.
During the first intermission, I tweeted out that I thought, now I think the whole Bruins team had struggled, but the Bruins top line, Geekie, Lindholm, Pastrnak, had at 5-5 really been pinned in. Shot attempts were 12-3 in favor of Utah when they were on the ice. That line had a tough game in Minnesota on Sunday too, to the point where Marco Sturm ended up breaking them up as that game went on. And so I just tweeted that and said, I wonder if he thinks about breaking them up again. And then they put together that dominant first shift and score 27 seconds or whatever, 23 seconds into the second period. So I was like, well, I should just like taking a victory lap right there on Twitter. Like, you're welcome, Bruins fans.
Yeah, you gotta start tweeting things out. You got to start tweeting things out about, the Bruins not winning the cup this year, USA not winning gold, anything you want to have happen. You just got to say the opposite. Yeah. So, and McAvoy again, like just, I'm blown away. He's back this early and has been back for 3 games now.
And I
right?
still think isn't eating solid food yet.
Like
he said he's eating mush. So like not quite like full blender, but he's like graduated to like soft foods.
Oof,
like what, like yogurt or?
Well, I think he was eating yogurt. I think he's been eating like yogurt, ice cream, that kind of stuff for a while. But I don't know. Like, does that mean like baked beans? Like, I don't know what qualifies as mush. Probably some vegetables. Yeah, I don't think he's like biting into steak quite yet. But he's mixing in some stuff.
And that makes a difference too. Like, I mean, obviously I guess I don't know this for sure, but I would imagine, he's normally eating a lot of chicken, a lot of steak, a lot of meats, right? I mean, it's, professional athletes, you have to be at peak performance. And a lot of times that does require having a lot of substance. So that's not something to sneeze at. That change in his diet and nutrition while still competing at the highest level. I mean, he deserves high praise for that. And we all sat here when he first got hurt and we were talking like, oh man, I mean, that could be, we might be lucky to see him, late December, New Year.
Is he going to be able to play the Olympics? Like people were like,
yeah. I mean, just very high marks to Charlie for what he's done.
I didn't bring this up, but I think when McAvoy was talking about coming back, so this might have been a week ago Monday when we talked to him before they went out on the road. I don't think I had watched the replay of the shot since it happened. I was just like, that's not something I need to watch again. But I watched that, and because we were doing the 25 years, 25 moments, I had just watched the Chara shot and that whole moment, relived that. And then I also watched Nikita Zadorov, the shot that broke his jaw when he was in Colorado, because his was actually kind of a similar area as McAvoy's in terms of the break. So like I brought myself to watch all 3 of those, and one thing that just like immediately jumped out was like that shot that hit McAvoy was significantly harder than those other 2. Like that came with way more velocity than the shot that broke Chara's jaw, which was a wrister that rode up his stick. Yeah. Or the one that broke Zadorov's shot was like a wrister that kind of just got dumped in from the point and just caught him up high. I was like, those shots were probably like in the, 70 something miles an hour, which is like still hard and very painful and will break your jaw. I was like, that Dobson slapper that hit McAvoy, that thing was probably like around 90 miles an hour. Like that really was. And you even noticed it, like comparing it to other plays that have resulted in broken jaws. I was like, man, that really was like about as hard of one as you're going to see.
Kaslik didn't slow it down much.
No,
it nicked him. I mean, honestly, thank God it did. Because Mark Kaslik's jersey was the only thing standing in the way of a full force NHL slap shot right to the jaw. I mean, that's and like I said, it didn't slow it down much. That video is, yeah, it's insane. Anyway, so where do you guys want to go from here? I mean, the Bruins. Let's talk about the defense, okay? I mean,
and their new defenseman Vladislav Kolyachonok. Did I do it?
Kolyachonok.
I did
it. I don't think we have another half hour for you to pronounce it, Bridget. we can talk about him later. Let's talk about the Bruins defense, because we have talked about McAvoy on the power play and his quick return. Him and Zadorov had not their greatest outing against Minnesota. Nobody on the team did. But just talk about how the D pair settled in last night, and Hampus, Lindholm, Andrew Peeke. I think Soderstrom's been solid, like very quietly. He's been steady, and so I think he deserves high marks there. And let's talk about Lohrei as well. So let's touch on the D. What's concerning to you? What's positive to you?
Yeah, well, and I do think it's worth bringing up Kolyachonok here. So for people who miss this or maybe don't have the background, he was with Dallas this year. They waived him. Bruins claimed him off waivers. 24 years old, left shot, 6'1", puck mover type of defenseman. His underlying like analytics are good. Like they're really solid. In limited minutes, I think 11 games played for Dallas, 12, 13 minutes a game type of guy. So, but an interesting play to bring in and provide some competition because he's now on their roster. They can't send him to Providence without waivers. Obviously, the Bruins have a bunch of injuries on defense. So I'll also take this moment to mention that like before Tuesday's morning skate, the Bruins had basically an entire decor of injured guys skating. There was like some of these guys I think were already skating while the Bruins were on the road, but obviously we're not at Warrior, so we don't see it. But it was Jordan Harris, Jonathan Aspero, Henry Jokiharju, Mike Callahan were all out there, as was Mate Blumel as a forward. And Sturm said Victor Arvidsson has also skated, even though he wasn't out there yesterday. So it's like everyone's starting to work their way back. They're at least on the ice. But for now, Kolyachonok brings some depth. And I do wonder if he challenges for playing time. If we see him get into a game here at some point, you would assume the Bruins would want to take a look at what they have, probably sooner rather than later. So I'm interested to see what that looks like, because I think Mason Lohrei's had some tough plays recently. The goal, was this the Minnesota game or no, it was the Winnipeg game where he gets beat down the boards. It was Alex Iafallo. But like a couple,
which was a good play by Iafallo,
yeah.
but yes, he's beat on it. To your point, like sometimes you tip your cap, but he was beat straight up.
Yeah, and I thought the Lohrei Soderstrom pairing against Utah got pinned in quite a bit. I don't think they got scored on, and I don't believe they were out there for that goal. So they survived, but they had some shifts where they were under stress. So I don't know. I wonder like, is there a Lohrei healthy scratch coming, or Soderstrom maybe comes out? Probably worth noting, Kolyachonok and Soderstrom have been a pairing before when they were both in Arizona. So
look at you, Scott.
Yeah. So I am interested. Like I think Kolyachonok can push for playing time. I don't think he might end up being just a warm body until guys come back injured, but I think the Bruins want to take a real look at him.
I was going to say, we had this conversation during the game yesterday about Soderstrom. I think I said to you at some point in the third period, like he's actually been like noticeably doing some things well the last few games, not just like, oh, it's almost like when a defenseman gets called up, the best case scenario is that you just hope that you don't notice them, right? Like you hope that you don't notice them making the glaring mistakes. And I feel like he hasn't made a lot of those, especially in the last few games. And then I started noticing him doing things well, and it was starting to stick out that direction for me. And I mentioned something to Scott about it, that he has, at least the last two games, looked like a guy that is supposed to be in the NHL, right? Like he's at the pace, he's making decisions, he's keeping up. So that was a question mark with him. And when we talked to Mark Diver, was it 2 weeks ago, he mentioned Soderstrom as a potential call up, but like that he still looked like he was a little bit behind because he was playing in Sweden and then he was playing in the AHL, and now he's called up to the NHL after Aspero's injury. And I don't know. I think he's been doing maybe better than I expected, just because I didn't 100% know what the defensive side of his game was going to look like. We knew he had a little bit more offense, but like defensively, that was kind of where he had a knock, was like, all right, I don't know if he can keep up with the top players in the league in the NHL in terms of coverage. And I felt like he's done well.
No, he has. He has. And that's why I say just quietly he's been steady. So, again, if the Bruins decor is perfectly healthy, I don't know if Victor has a top 6 spot, but we'll see if they ever are completely healthy. But he deserves some stick taps for how he's played. And what's the injury sustained and timeline to Aspero? Do we know that?
Well, he was just put on IR. Was the responding move to the Kolyachonok?
Like he wasn't one of the guys out there skating at Warrior with the other injured players. Was
No,
he?
he was out there.
Okay.
Yeah. So Sturm said he was asked if any of those guys are close to returning, and he kind of said like basically like not super close. So I don't know if that means like they're not going to be back this week or they're not going to be back before Christmas. They could activate Aspero at any point because I think he's already missed enough time to satisfy injured reserve.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, obviously, like next step is see who gets out there for practice. Bruins are going to be at home, so at some point when any of them are getting close, they'll be out there for a practice or morning skate.
I had someone tweet. I forget if it was at me or if it was at the Skate Pod account. When Scott posted that the acquisition does this mean that Laura is on the hot seat? So I think maybe it does apply a little pressure, but I don't really know what they're expecting to do with Kolyachonok just as of right now, because the guys that have been in, like, I've had more of an issue with the Lindholm Peak pair recently. I mean, that pair has been a little bit rough.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like we've talked about it. So I thought they were better last night against Utah. If they play the way they played against Utah, I don't have an issue with it. But yeah, they had a couple of rough games recently. I don't know if Kolyachonok is going to be a top 4 option. You're kind of low on those right now, but I do think he's a player that they're going to want to see at some point. So just in that sense, it could be pressure on Lohrei. Prior to adding him, they had 6 defensemen on the NHL roster. That means all 6 are playing. There's no pressure on anyone. Like, I mean, there's always pressure. You're in the NHL, like, obviously, but just in terms of like day to day, who's in and out of the lineup, there wasn't another option. So you at least knew you're playing. Now there's another option. Now they're back to 7 defensemen. So
Scott, and I didn't see the video, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that with our listeners. Who was skating on the ice at Warrior among those defensemen? I'm just gonna name some names, and you stop me when I'm wrong. Henry Jokiharju, Jonathan Aspero, Mike Callahan, Jordan Harris, all those guys are skating.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay, so that's encouraging. At least they're skating. I mean, Jordan Harris has been on the shelf since October. So
he started skating last week.
Okay, that's good. That's good news.
And so one other thing I'll note here with all these guys, Callahan, once he's activated, could be sent to Providence without waivers, and Soderstrom could still be sent back to Providence without waivers. Again, for people who don't know, you got to get to, if you get to 10 games in the NHL, then you have to clear waivers again. Right now, Soderstrom and Callahan are both under that. Everyone else, now you can send someone to the HL for conditioning assignment coming off an injury, so that could buy you a couple games. But like once Jordan Harris is healthy, he's on your NHL roster. Same with Jokiharju. So, that's they're going to have roster decisions to make at some point with some of these guys. But for now, it seems like they're kind of just starting to work their way back up.
It's amazing how many guys have played defense for the Bruins this year in at least one game. Goaltending, Jeremy Swayman, he wasn't called upon a ton in the last 2/3 of last night's game. I thought in the first period he was called upon a lot, especially like I said earlier in the episode in those first 15 minutes. And he obviously didn't have his greatest performance in Minnesota, nor did the rest of his teammates, but it was his teammates weren't ready to go at the drop of the puck, and had he been along with them, then last night may have been a different result. So it was good to see him bounce back last night.
Yeah, really good, and I think an important bounce back. Like that's what a number one goalie does, right? Every goalie, no matter how good, is going to have an off night here and there. Whether it's you individually just have an off night, the team has an off night, you don't pick them up. Like Minnesota was the latter, as kind of everyone had an off night. But yeah, number one goalies bounce back. They don't let it turn into 2 or 3 tough games in a row, and he definitely did.
And I would say the same has been said team wide for the Bruins for the most part ever since their 6-game regulation losing streak earlier this year, and they haven't let losing streaks snowball really since then. So that's been a good team trait to have. Bridget and Scott, do you have any final talking points before we throw it over to our interview with Mike Commito?
I do not. I'm ready to go.
All right. You want me to throw it? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right,
Yeah.
All right, here it is.
To all of our readers out there, and hopefully new readers upon listening to this episode, Bruins 365 Daily Stories from the Ice is a new book out there, obviously about the Boston Bruins, and it goes into the history of the team on a day-by-day basis throughout the calendar year. And today we are joined by the author of that book, Mike Commito. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Mike, how did you come up with the idea for this book? Because you've done a few of these now.
Yeah, so it all kind of started when we started the Hockey 365 series. This would have been the first one came out in 2018, and the idea for that series was, by that point, like, I had been writing quite a bit on the hockey history side of things. I'd started off blogging, and then I was sharing these daily hockey history facts on Twitter, and then I just kind of thought maybe there's a way to kind of take the format that's working well with these daily facts on social media and putting it into a book. And that's honestly how the whole series kind of came together, was taking something for every day of the year, whether it's a milestone goal or a big trade or a signing, and then kind of building it out that way. And then after doing 2 volumes where we just really focused on general hockey history, including like international hockey, teams across the league, teams that no longer exist, I started doing team-specific books in 2023. So I did the Leafs first, then the Habs last year, and then here we are now in 2025 with the Bruins. So getting halfway through the original 6, no plans of where we're going next. But again, the publisher had wanted me to do a different team book than the Bruins, and I really was the one that kind of pushed for Boston to be the 3rd installment in the series.
Can I ask for you to just share your background a little bit with our listeners? Why those 3 teams? Explain, obviously we just talked to you before that you're from Ontario, but
Yep.
Can you just give a little bit of what led you maybe from your past to this career?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was kind of born into being a Leafs fan. My mom is a huge Leafs fan, and that's why I kind of followed that path. Again, she's from Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, which is the hometown of Phil Esposito, who's a Bruins legend. So, I mean, she probably would have done me a lot of favors if she had cheered for the black and gold from day one. But she didn't do that. She rebelled against her grandparents, and she cheered for the Leafs, and here we are today. And so, but as for the hockey piece, like I'd gone to school to become a historian. So I was doing my PhD at McMaster University, and I started hockey blogging to escape from what I was doing. And that's honestly how it started. I had a number of different opportunities here and there where I was, blogging for myself. I was blogging for the Royal Half, which is a LA Kings fan blog, and I was getting paid in Kings t-shirts that the Royal Half was making up. And so I still have those because they're collector's items for sure. And then I got some paid opportunities with Sportsnet and Vice, when Vice was still doing sports coverage. And then that really kind of, those articles I was writing kind of helped build up my portfolio for me to get to where I am in terms of getting to the book idea in 2018. I had a base that I could draw from as to why I should start to do some more of these stories in the book format. And then, so when we got to doing a team-specific book in the 365 series, obviously I picked the Leafs first because that's my team. I felt like if I was going to dive in and do a team-specific book first, I'd want to pick the team that I'd grown up watching. And then the next year I had not planned on doing another book. The publisher kind of said, we'd like you to do the Habs book next. And I was kind of hemming and hawing. I just finished writing the Leafs book, and they didn't intimate that they were going to get somebody else to write it, but it was kind of put in the air that like, well, if you don't do it, then, you know, maybe there's somebody else you could recommend. And at that point I'm like, no, I'll do it then. If we're not having anybody else come into this series, like I'll do it. Habs one kind of made a lot of sense as well, though, just obviously growing up in Canada, you know, the big battles between the two teams, they're, you know, both heavily featured on Hockey Night in Canada. My father-in-law is a diehard Habs fan, so it made a lot of sense. And then when it was time to do the next book, the publisher wanted Wings 365. And again, nothing against the Red Wings. I've got a lot of love for that team. I think there's a lot of great stories there. But for where I am in Sudbury, Ontario, like the Bruins, after you go through the Leafs and the Habs, I would say that that's the next most popular team in town. We've got a lot of Bruins connections here, you know, from more recent guys like Tyler Bertuzzi, Nick Foligno. But Jerry Topazini is the big one here in Sudbury. He played for the Bruins, you know, in the 50s and 60s. Founded a bar in Sudbury after he had retired called the Beef and Bird, which is still a shrine to his time with the Bruins. And I spent many Friday nights there doing what 20-somethings in Sudbury did. And then they also did this great thing at the Beef called Porchetta Bingo, which if you've got enough time, I could get into that a little bit later. But that was a Saturday afternoon tradition where you went to the Beef at 11 to get a spot. And then you left at, you know, 6 or 7 o'clock at night. And that was probably the end of your evening because you'd been drinking before lunchtime and you may or may not have had enough food, depending on how lucky you were in Porchetta Bingo that day.
Okay, I kind of want to hear about Porchetta Bingo now. I mean, we've got some time. We'll get to, you know, we'll get to all the Bruins on ice stories, but you had mentioned this when we were messaging back and forth before the podcast. So I wasn't going to ask you to expand before, but now my interest is very much piqued.
It's a uniquely Sudbury thing. They do Porchetta Bingo at a number of establishments, but in my opinion, and I think the opinion of many people from Sudbury, like the original OG place to do Porchetta Bingo was at the Beef and Bird. And I mean, porchetta it's an Italian pork roast. You just like cook it low and slow for a few hours and you carve it up, and it's great. You can get it in other places, but like Sudbury really has the recipe dialed in terms of like how we put it all together. But the way that it kind of comes together at the Beef is that Jerry and his family started doing these fundraisers every Saturday to benefit Coppercliff Minor Hockey, which is, you know, Jerry grew up in Coppercliff, which is a stone's throw away from the Beef and Bird. And to date, they've raised like over $1 million for minor hockey in our community, which is unreal. But the way that it works is you go to the Beef, get a spot, you know, hopefully before lunchtime on a Saturday, and you buy these playing cards. And it's really just it's 3 cards from a deck of cards that are laminated together. And you can buy as many of these cards as you want. And there's a caller at the front of the room. And all he does is just go through a deck of cards. And if you get the 3 cards called that you have on your sheet, you win. And the key here, and especially for any of the listeners and viewers, that if you ever go to Porchetta Bingo at the Beef and Bird, you will get booed mercilessly if you yell out bingo. You have to yell out Porchetta. And so if you do not yell Porchetta, the bar lets you have it. And then if you make a mistake and you don't have your 3 cards correct, which again, you would think that that's probably an easy thing not to do. It's only 3 cards, but after you've been drinking all day, you'd be surprised how many people mess up and think they have a bingo or a Porchetta, and the bar lets you have it if you've made a mistake. So it's a fun time. We used to do it a lot. It's a huge time commitment, but it's a uniquely Sudbury thing. It's done a lot of great good for local hockey in our community. And it's obviously a fun place. And certainly if you're a Bruins fan, you couldn't be in a better spot, because if you look around the bar, there's tons of stuff all over the walls from Jerry's time with the Bruins, a lot of Phil Esposito, Bobby Orr. And then the other connection to hockey there is that Jerry Topazini was Justin Williams' great uncle. So there's a lot of Justin Williams stuff in the bar as well.
Is it like grandmas booing each other? Or is this like a full age range of people? Because when you said bingo, I'm thinking like, you know, the demographic of bingo. Is this like anybody comes in and everybody?
Oh no, it's like you've got like young people, like so the rowdy young crowd to like my crowd now, and then like the older crowd. So like I'll say some of the chants I'm sure probably haven't aged well, but I'll say this one just because you give you an idea of like who goes to these things. So we brought my 80-year-old, at the time she was 80, she's now 92 years old. So my Baba, so she grew up in the Sioux, so she's Ukrainian, and she married an Italian. And so we brought her to the Beef and Bird for Porchetta Bingo. And the chant that they always do when it's your first time at Porchetta Bingo is that he or she, it's like she's a virgin. And they chanted this for my 8-year-old Laba at the Beef and Bird. And she's the type of gal that she appreciated the attention she got that day and the crude chants. She's been known to mix it up with the best of them, but those are the type of chants you get, and it's everybody from my 8-year-old Baba down to somebody who's there 19 years old just having a good time on a Saturday.
Fun Jerry Topazzini fact that you might know, Mike, but he is still to this day the last skater to play goalie in an NHL game. I believe the story was there was like the end of a Bruins game, goalie got injured, they didn't have a backup. You didn't have to always have a backup at the time, and instead of like waiting for the what today would be the emergency third goalie, like house goalie, it was like the last minute of a game. He was like, I'm just going to go in and play goalie. And no skaters done it since. Yeah, that's definitely, like, I've got a few Jerry Topazzini stories in the book, but that's one of them for sure, because again, just went in there. I think he got lucky. He didn't have to face any shots, but if anyone were to go in there and have to actually field a shot from, and they were playing the Blackhawks that night. So you had like Bobby Hull on the other side. But Jerry was a tough guy. So certainly if anyone could handle that without wearing goalie gear, it would have been Jerry Topazzini.
Scott, how quick you forget about Michael Ryder in 2011 against Montreal in the playoffs. But hey,
that was one of the 25 moments from our series on WEI that we put up last week.
Did you send Mike your 25?
No, I didn't. Yeah, Mike, we did
it to review.
Not quite 365 stories, but for WEI.com we did for all 4 Boston teams, we did 25 years, 25 moments. So just from 2000 to now. So like kind of 25 most memorable Bruins moments. Mike, I'm interested. So when you obviously 365 that's a lot to tackle. When you're going in, like, what are you thinking for a starting place? Are you like, all right, there's certain players' stories I have to touch on, or are you like immediately looking for kind of the deeper stories and the more unknown stuff? Like, what was kind of your approach diving in?
Yeah, so the approach for diving in, it's like I honestly just basically start a spreadsheet from Jan 1st all the way till December 31st. And there's some moments where off the top of my head, like roughly what happened those days. Like you think of obviously 2011, we knew that we were going to talk about, clinching the Stanley Cup. Bobby Orr's flying goal to win the Stanley Cup in 1970. Like those ones, you immediately slot those in wherever those go. But after that, it's kind of like you go through the days and you're doing your research. I'm either mining my old tweets to see what I talked about that day. If there's anything there, maybe that's what I go with. Otherwise, I'm using a database that I have access through the Hockey Hall of Fame and some of my other sources I have, and just kind of seeing what happened on that day. So you often get days where you've got the big moments in franchise history, and then you've got some of the lesser known stories, or maybe some of the stories that have been forgotten to history. And so like those are always fun to tell as well, because you especially with a team that's been around since 1924, there's a lot of great stories there. There's a lot of important stories to the franchise, but there's also just the fun stories where, again, there might be a slower day that day. And that's where you can talk about something that, you may have even forgotten, or you didn't know the full story. And by doing the research, I'm able to kind of pull something together that paints a more complete picture. But there's a lot of those fun moments as well. Like I think the one that I think about that I knew going to the book, like when Ron Asseltine, like the linesman, like decks that fan that jumps over the boards to try to give the ref a piece of his mind, like stories like that, those are in there. And obviously like Lucic bowling over Ryan Miller in that game, and then potentially like the Sabres have not recovered since then. So like all these different moments where they may not be, the thing that clinches the cup, or it may not be a big trade, but you do have all those moments as well. So I think it's important to have a mix, and it's important to kind of divide the stories up so that you can certainly do like a Bobby Orr 365 book. And I'm sure a lot of people would want to read it, but I think it's trying to share the stories around with different players who may not have played such a prominent role, but they're still fan favorites. Everybody has that third line, fourth line grinder that they loved growing up. So it's to try to find enough space to include as many different players in as many different moments as you can, knowing that you do have a lot of space to fill with 365. But I would say every time I do these books and I go back, it's like, I forgot this one, or I should have done this one. And, just conflicted with the date that day. And there's really no way of getting around it unless like you have to pick one at some point.
I mean, with these individual teams, it's obviously, a challenge in and of itself, right? But you drag that out to hockey in general, like your previous two books. Is it the same process, just on a bigger scale? Like, do you find it like if I were in your shoes, I wouldn't even know where to begin. You're talking the possibilities are endless, and obviously it comes down to specific days in the calendar. But did you find it overwhelming, and like how did your approach change from a general scope of hockey 365 to the specific teams?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly have a more shallow pool when you're dealing with teams only. I think it is almost overwhelming because you have so many things to choose from. And I think ultimately right now, if we were to go back and we were to do like the third period of this original general hockey books, like there's even more that I could pick from now from when we started in 2018. Because again, you could start including more women's hockey history as well. You've got international hockey you can pull in. People have talked to me about like you should put in more World Junior moments in the books. And to be quite honest, I don't think I have any World Junior history in each of the maybe one in the second book, but like that's a whole other thing. And you could add that in, and you've got World Championship hockey. And you're right, you can kind of just really lose it trying to figure out what to do. Whereas with the team specific books, like it does kind of anchor you because you know that, hey, I know that today was also the anniversary of something else, but it has nothing to do with the Bruins. So I can't really include that unless we really want to kind of stretch things out here. So it does kind of keep you grounded. I do find that the only time that you get a little bit worried is in the summer months when things kind of start to fade out after free agency frenzy. You get to the dog,
go look for birthdays and just be like, this is this guy's birthday. Let's talk about him.
Exactly. So like in the first two books, I didn't really use birthdays at all. I think I used Wayne Gretzky's birthday in the first book. And that was also because he had actually done some pretty cool stuff on his birthday, but I tried not to use those. But when you do these team specific books, like you really have no choice but to go to that. And I think the way that I did it was that, yes, it's this guy's birthday, but ultimately we're not going to talk about his birthday more or less. We're going to really use it as an entry point to talk about something else he did with the Bruins, or what did he do in his career before he got to the Bruins. And so the birthdays have been a good way of actually kind of including a player who may not have otherwise been included in the book. And so I think it's just kind of reframing how a birthday can be used. And then, I mean, ultimately, if we wrote this book like 5 years ago, we had bubble hockey as well, so that we wouldn't have had at that point. So by this point, you now have a few dates in August that you can pull from where the Bruins are playing in August, which again, 5 years ago, no one ever thought we would have had hockey played at that level in August and September. So blessing in disguise, but ultimately it gives you a little bit more content. But luckily there was always something, there was always a birthday, but you do always worry going to this, like, what if there's nothing that happens on that day, birthday wise, signing wise? Like, what if I can't find anything? And that hasn't happened yet. So who knows what that'll look like in the future, but I'll have to get a little creative and fill that page with something else.
Yeah, I never thought I'd be watching hockey on my birthday, which is August 30th. I was like, I remember, this is great. We're all locked down, but I'm okay with this being on my birthday. It was a good gift, and what was not the most fun time. But my question to you is, I'm sure when you're starting to hear about stories, right? Like something piques your interest, and maybe it's a little bit more obscure, or maybe it's something people don't really talk about as much anymore as a past generation like knows it, but then like our generation doesn't really. Do you ever along the way hear something, want to confirm it or get more details of just to be able to add more to it, and then maybe call the player or call somebody whose account you could maybe just get a little bit of extra color and add to your stories? Like, have you talked to Phil Esposito? Have you talked to any of these past Bruins guys who are like, let me tell you about this time, this thing that you should put in the book?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for this one, I didn't really have the chance to do that too much. And I think, not that I didn't have the chance, I didn't ask, but because the stories are so short, oftentimes like you get enough info from, either your own memory of what happened or from watching a YouTube clip or from your own general knowledge and research of that topic. So I didn't reach out to anybody for this one. I've interviewed guys like Nick Foligno in the past. So like a lot of the stories that I mentioned, like the beef and bird and porchetta bingo, are kind of informed by past interviews. I did a story with Nick a few years ago when he signed with Boston, which was obviously big news in Sudbury. And because everyone in Sudbury was hoping that if the Bruins that year, won the Stanley Cup, that Nick would have been bringing the cup back to Sudbury and he would have undoubtedly brought it to the Beef and Bird, where Jerry's son Anthony said that if he brings the cup to the Beef and Bird, I'll give him porchetta for life, which I thought was better than winning the Stanley Cup. But obviously I'll never win the Stanley Cup, but I could probably maybe get porchetta for life in some way. So I didn't necessarily get to talk to a lot of players on that, but there are stories where somebody gives me an idea and I'd never heard of it before, and you have to do some digging. And one example that came up was Lionel Hitchman played for the Bruins in the 30s, and he was actually the first player who had his number retired by the team. So his number 3 is hanging up in TD Garden. And to be quite honest, like I had never heard of Lionel Hitchman before. It was my editor who was editing the book that said she had edited a book from Lionel Hitchman's granddaughter, who wrote a book about him to try to get more profile or more visibility for her grandfather, either from the team and also from the Hockey Hall of Fame. And I had to do some more digging because admittedly, there's not a ton out there on Hitch. So I talked to his granddaughter who wrote the book, read through some of the book to get more context around like who this guy was. And again, he was quite the Renaissance man. And I think I could have devoted more pages to him just because I only have 175 words per story, but like, after you unpack the fact that he was Eddie Shore's right-hand man. So he allowed Eddie Shore to really do what Eddie Shore did, because Hitch was more of the stay-at-home defenseman, which was not necessarily a term we used in the 30s, but that's kind of the role that he played. But outside of what he did on the ice that really allowed those two to kind of run and gun together was that, he played piano, he had fly fishing records, he wrote poetry, he kept a pet bear of his own, which that should have been its own story, because I don't, and I'm kicking myself now because I'd spent a lot of my life studying bear history, which is a real thing. And I'd never got the name of the bear, how long he had the bear, where did he keep the bear, where did the bear come from? So I think already if we were to ever do like a Bruins 365 volume 2, like there has to be a story in there just for Hitch's bear, because there has to be more there that needs to be unpacked.
I mean, for years, I've thought that the Bruins should have a real bear as a mascot. Like Georgia football is a real bulldog, and the Texas Longhorns have a cow. I'm like, get a bear out there.
Yeah. By the way, guys, how have we not mentioned? Everybody keeps talking about porchetta. Could you imagine the reaction from a town full of Sudbury citizens if a bunch of Boston, Massachusetts people were yelling porchetta, porchetta? They'd be getting razzed the whole time.
They'd love it. Send a bus down Saturday afternoon.
Lionel Hitchman's an interesting guy because there's a lot of times he gets mentioned as potentially the best player not in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. And you're right, like had his number retired. An easy player to not fully appreciate or understand today, because like you said, it's like he's not going to have any of the stats or numbers, and we really don't even have a whole lot of video from that era, so it's not like no one can even go back and watch how good was he defensively. So you really only have to rely on what was written and covered about him way back then. Mm-hmm. I was on the committee that selected the Bruins Centennial team, and unfortunately, we probably didn't help his case because he ended up being one of our final cuts because the Bruins are just so loaded on defense. Like we could only put 6 on there, and I think the final debate was are we putting Dick Clapper on defense or forward? So unfortunately, Lionel Hitchman got left off of that too, and probably continues to just be underrated.
Yeah.
But you did, he also did the 100, right? You had a list of 100 Bruins players in the first 100 years of the franchise, and you took it very seriously and deep dove in your order. You had your order, and you, even though I don't think they published it with an order in mind, but right. I know you had your order. I'm sure you and Scott could probably talk for a long time about Some players that maybe were forgotten or, that were really good, but we just didn't really think too much about just because it was times gone by. But yeah, I'm sure. Scott, did you ever write an article off that? I'm sure.
I did. When we went through and announced the whole team, I published my own list, everything, like how we debated the team and all that. So
and then
that was a lot of fun. And
was Hitch on that one, the 100?
Yeah, he was. I think I had him top 25. I want to say I had him around 23 or 24.
Yeah.
So Mike, I'm curious, when writing Bruins 365 compared to Leafs 365 compared to Wings 365,
Canadians 365.
Canadian, sorry.
Right, yeah.
So with the Leafs, I'm curious. It's a two-part question.
Yeah.
Did you find it easier in the sense that, if you growing up a fan of a certain team, I feel like there's a natural ability to know the significance of certain moments, and in your head you're like, I know this happened. Then it's easier to look up. Whereas a team you didn't grow up as a diehard fan for, it's probably a little bit more due diligence. But so was it easier in that sense? Part A, and then part B, did you find that writing Leafs 365 was maybe more challenging in the sense of maybe you felt more pressure to get things right because you're kind of speaking to the fans that you grew up cheering with? What was it like writing, the differences for writing between the Leafs and then the other teams as well?
Yeah, no. So I think those are good questions, because ultimately with the Leafs one, I think you're drawing more from your own personal experience. And I think I have a handle more of what at least from my perspective growing up, of what I felt was significant or what I knew about some of these players. I think there definitely is, because people know that I'm a Leafs fan, is like I say it in the book that I'm a Leafs fan. So obviously at that point, they know that this is supposed to be written from somebody who has a Leafs fan perspective. And so I do believe that there is more of an obligation there to at least try to get it right, knowing that what my perspective is going to be very different from yours. And so even if we're both cheering for the same team, how I view things is ultimately going to be different. So it's just, I try to do my duty as a historian to interpret those events as best as I can. But I do feel like the obligation was higher with the other books, because I'm not a Habs fan. I'm not a Bruins fan. And so I'm, trying to bring this product to a fan base that I'm not necessarily a part of, and hoping that they want to read it. And so I felt the burden more heavily with those two. And so I think especially with the Habs one, I knew going into it that no one's going to want to read either a Habs book or a Bruins book from the perspective of a Leafs fan. That's going to be kind of lame, except for the times when the Bruins obviously destroy the Leafs and you want to hear about me crying about how it ruined my night, which I do several times in the book. But I wanted to make sure that I did my best as a historian to research the fan base and then tell the stories from the perspective that a fan of that team would want to hear. And so I think that's kind of how I try to approach it. But ultimately, I do know that I have blind spots with both of those franchises. I think ultimately I can do a ton of research and I can kind of base what I believe to be my understanding of a certain player, but not having grown up with it, there's definitely times where you're going to miss the nuance of how is that player talked about, on a day-to-day basis, how are they perceived in the media? And you could, if you had all the time in the world to research these books, I think if this was your full-time job, you could really kind of dive deep into all of that stuff. But I think for trying to get the stories out there and fill 365 pages, you kind of do your best that you can with the resources you have available. But certainly I do acknowledge that not being a fan of those teams, there's certain things where, again, I may not have gotten it 100% right just because I didn't live it day to day, but I try to do the best that we could with the space that we have. But certainly I will say this, because upon reflection, people often say well, was the Leafs one the most fun to write because you're a fan of that team? And I'd honestly say it wasn't the most fun that I had. I think because it was I'd done these books before, but that was my first time writing about a specific team. I feel like my voice for the other team books became more apparent as we started writing. And I think I had more fun doing the Habs, and I think I had the most fun doing the Bruins, even though there's definitely stories in the Bruins book where I'm remembering moments as a Leafs fan where I wanted to pull my hair out or run through a wall, not in a good way. But I had a lot of fun doing the research and writing the stories. And I think, in my opinion, it was more fun doing the other books than it was doing my own team's book. I'll say that. I mean, I still enjoyed doing the Leafs book, but I think I had more fun, and it's more fun to see the other ones out in the world, knowing that, that I got to kind of stretch stretch my legs and flex my muscles as a historian to do those other stories.
Is there anyone when you were researching and putting together this Bruins book that you heard about, and maybe they're not even with us anymore, but you were like, I wish I could have a beer with that guy. Like, I want to hear more.
Yeah, well, there was one story that I have in there where, again, and I can't recall off the top of my head if he is still with us or not, but if he was, or if he is, hopefully he's still with us. But Dean Prentice was a guy who I have one story about in the book, and he played some time for the Bruins in the 60s, and the story with him was that he got leveled into the boards in a game, and he was given a penalty shot. But as he was getting up, like, he didn't feel right. Like, he knew that something was wrong, that he was probably injured and probably shouldn't be in the game. But this was the 60s, different time, different way of approaching hockey and injuries. And he took the penalty shot and he scored a goal. And then after the game, he went to the hospital. They did a bunch of tests and x-rays, and they discovered that he had broken his back. So he had broken a few vertebrae. So he shouldn't have been playing. And so the fact that he scored a goal with a broken back is pretty impressive. He spent many months in recovery, because he broke his back December 27th, 1964. And so missed the rest of the season while he recovered from this. But the best part is, again, speaks to the different era of that time. He spent his summer job hauling kegs in a warehouse. So his back had obviously been good enough by that point that he went back to doing hard labor, which is something that the non-star players had to do at that time. So I would just like to sit down with a guy like that to just be like, how did you do that? Why did you do that? These are all the type of questions. I think there's many characters in the book where I'd love to have beers and just kind of get into some of these stories. But Dean Prentice is one where it's when you think of they don't make him like they used to, he's a prime example of that. And again, I think given the fact he spent his summer hauling kegs of beer, he'd probably be a fun guy to have a beer with.
Well, I'll tell you, we had Phil Esposito on, was it 2 years ago?
Yeah.
And he seems like somebody that if you get him talking, he's got a lot of stories. You would love to sit down with him, I'm sure.
He is on my list of guys that I want to interview, because he grew up in the Sioux. I mentioned this earlier, the same place as my mom and her family grew up. And he grew up in the same neighborhood, or not far from the neighborhood that my mom grew up in. And my mom's dad, who he had passed away when I was really young, he was quite the hockey player in his own day. And so he had gone to a few Red Wings training camps, never made the team, but he had played hockey in Italy for a year to help try to grow the game there. And the family story, and my uncle he's met Phil Esposito, and he says he's had it confirmed from Phil himself. But the story goes that when Phil was younger and he was playing, he wanted to be like my grandfather, Donnie Lotto. That was the player that he emulated. So I trust my uncle. I believe my uncle, but I want to hear it directly from Phil one day that he did, in fact, idolize Donnie Lotto growing up. So that's my bucket list interview, because I just want to have it in my own, in a tape recorder that I can kind of hold on to. So again, I don't doubt that he told my uncle that, but I haven't heard it myself. So I'd love to chat with him one day and have a beer with him would be, I'm sure, a lot of fun.
I might have his number.
He's still around just about every Tampa home game. I was just thinking I'll probably see him when I'm down there for the Stadium Series game. Mike, we don't have a lot of people on from Ontario usually, so I do have to ask. It's been a tough season for the Leafs. What is the feeling up there among Leafs fandom?
It's tough. I mean, I always try not to get too high and too low, especially early in the season, but it's not early anymore. That was kind of my excuse for a little while. And I think ultimately up here in Canada, the Blue Jays were an incredible smoke screen for the team for up through the first month of the season. I didn't care about the Leafs up until November 1st, just because I was fixated on what the Jays were doing and watching that, them play every other night. It's tough, because then they go through a stretch where they seem like they figured it out. They've got 2 wins in a row, 3 wins in a row, and then they come out and they lay an egg. And even last night, the night after we're talking right now, they're honoring Joe Bowen, who's a legend in Leafs land. He was, grew up listening to him on the call, and they come out in the first period and they absolutely lay an egg. And at that point, I'm this is so pathetic. They're trying to honor this legend, and this is the best that they can produce in the first period. I actually shut the game off. My wife and I end up watching something else. I go to bed early. And then I wake up in the morning and they scored 3 goals in the third period and they won the game. So it's this is the team that, has obviously vexed and frustrated me for 40 years of my life. But it's just tough. it's hard to diagnose what's going on. I mean, they've had the injuries, but injuries notwithstanding, like they're slow. They don't have an identity. Obviously, they're missing Marner, but like there's all these other these problems that have kind of revealed themselves that, you think that they're going to figure it out. You hope they're going to figure it out. They're never that far out of a playoff spot, but like there is starting this creeping doubt coming into me that like maybe this is the year that they actually like blow it and don't make the playoffs. And then what do you do at that point? Because you already did the nuclear option already, and this was supposed to kind of reset and get you into the playoffs. And then in the playoffs, you can prove this is why we made that move, because now we've got guys who are going to contribute in the playoffs. But like if they don't get there, then what was this year for, and what was everything else for? So that's my vent.
You guys might be the Bruins of last year. We had talked about that. It's like for a very long time, we're like, no, they're still going to make it. No, they're still going to make it. And then all of a sudden, I think Brian was the first one to be like, they're not going to make it.
They remind me. Yeah, I did say that about the Bruins last year, and the Leafs do remind me a lot of the Bruins last year right now. So maybe it's a soft sell at the deadline with certain players. But Mike, one more question from me. Obviously, there's been like a happy marriage between your hockey fandom and your history background. But I'm curious about your history background. Like, what you got your PhD, and the concentration was black bear hunting, I believe. Yeah. Right. Yeah. What ignited that love of history for you? Like, because the hockey meeting the history it's great. It's why you're on this podcast right now. It's why we're talking hockey. But that first factor, the history, the love of history, where did that come from for you?
I think that was always there. And even to tie it back to hockey, like when I was a kid, like I loved collecting hockey cards like a lot of kids did. And the hockey cards that I remember the most were the ones that told the stories. And I mean, the ones that I always think of when I think of, like, obviously I have my favorite players growing up, but like they used to do these cards, and I forget what set it was, but like they had like, it was a picture of like the Hart Trophy, and they explained, who Cecil Hart was and the origins behind the trophy, and like the Lady Byng, and, why they decided to donate that trophy. And those are the reasons I loved collecting those cards, was I loved to learn and get those stories. And then that was really my best subject in school. And so I always loved history, loved reading. And then like when I went to university, I fought the urge to take history, because my guidance counselors in high school basically told me there's no job that I could get with a history degree other than being a librarian or a teacher, which are both great jobs, by the way, but like they weren't necessarily things that I thought I wanted to do. So I went into poli-sci, and didn't go to class. It was horrible. I hated everything about it. And then finally in third year, after almost dropping out of university, and going to work in the mines, which is also a great career, but I was just kind of done with school. And then I figured out a path forward. I got into history, like committed to history in my third year. And then honestly, someone's like, why don't you do, like, I had a great advisor and still friend to this day, Mark. And he's like, you should consider buckling down and then maybe going to grad school. And so I went to I did my master's with him, did my master's thesis was about a forest fire and the response that the government had in Ontario to this big forest fire near Blind River. And then from there, it was like, I'm going to do a PhD. What am I going to do my PhD on? I was already doing environmental history. So the topic I picked was the history of black bear hunting and management in Ontario. And that is, it's an interesting topic. The reason I picked it was because there was always a lot of controversy in Ontario. They used to have the spring bear hunt in 1990, up until 1999. And I remember that controversy as a kid because it was this whole thing. And then I'm like, well, maybe I'll pick that because it's a little bit timely. We still have a lot of bears where I live. It's still an issue. And that's what I did. And I joke in the book that I should be a Bruins fan because I spent like 5 years of my life studying bears. During that time, people called me the bear guy. And anytime somebody went to like a roadside gas station and there was bear stuff, they bought it for me. So my house was full of like bear paraphernalia, bear shirts. My mom and dad bought my fiance, now wife, like a bear themed toilet seat. And that's where my wife said, no, this is like, I put up with all the other bear stuff. We're not having a bear toilet seat. So that went to my parents' house and they put it in the basement toilet. But like that was my whole life. And I mean, I've got a bear tattoo on my arm because of all the work that I did with that. So I mean,
does it say 2011 champs underneath that?
In an alternate universe, it might. So there's a lot of connections there. I think I probably should have been a Bruins fan in another life, but ultimately it's not how it worked out. But yeah, that's that. I just loved history. And obviously sport history is its own, subfield, and there's been a lot of great academic hockey history that's been written. For whatever reason, it wasn't on my radar when I was going to grad school. And then honestly, at first, I just kind of was doing it for fun, not even in an academic sense. And I kind of realized that the escape from trying to write peer-reviewed academic stuff was writing fun hockey history that anybody can enjoy, whether you're like an 8-year-old kid up until like a diehard fan, who grew up watching a lot of these older players. So that's just, the love's always been there. And I'm just glad that I was able to kind of take the love of history, the love of hockey, put them together and just have a lot of fun with it.
My dad can't say bear correctly. I don't know if this is a Boston accent thing, but one time there was a black bear in our backyard in New Hampshire, and he goes, "There's a beer in the backyard." And I'm like, "So what? Like, you left a beer out? Like, there's a beer. I'm like, "What?" And then he calls beer bear, and he calls bear beer. And I think it's some sort of weird New England accent that he's using.
That'd be confusing up here, especially. We got a lot of beer and a lot of bears here. But,
I thought he was just like, "Yeah, I left an IPA in the backyard." Like, I was like, "I don't care," but no, it was a bear.
Might be a Rhode Island thing, Bridget. Is he from Rhode Island?
It is. He's from Attleboro, which is, we're on the border to Rhode Island. It's like a weird accent, like a New England accent that's not quite a Boston accent, and luckily I don't have it.
I've heard dark chocolate pronounced dork chorklet from people from Providence, so I think it might be a Providence thing.
I think he sounds like Wiggy though. Like him and Wiggy have the same accent, and I don't know what it is because Wiggy's not from Rhode Island.
Mike, do you know who Wiggy is? Jermaine Wiggins, former Patriots tight end. He's on WEI on the radio.
Yeah, he's our coworker.
We're just referencing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And famously a beer league hockey MVP.
Yeah.
Wiggy loves
a bear league.
He loves to he loves to brag about his men's league exploits.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
But he was a professional football player for the Patriots, so yeah.
Scott, do you have anything left for Mike?
No, I think we're good.
I do. I got one.
Okay.
Okay, so you talked a little bit about the Leafs this year, but are people pissed off up in Toronto about Fraser Minten getting traded for Brendan Carlo, like, and a first round pick? Like, what is the aftermath of that trade to that fan base?
Yeah, I think people are starting to get it's starting to creep in again in the back of your mind that like this is probably a trade that we're going to ultimately lose. I think the Leafs needed to make some moves, but I think having spent enough time like with the Bruins for Bruins 365, like I think Leafs fans are also starting to maybe understand some of the frustration that Bruins fans had with Carlo, when he was healthy, when he was on the ice. And so to see because you got a Bruins book out, so I try to follow the Bruins whenever I can. Like I enjoy seeing him succeeding this year. Ultimately, I think that, in the long run, that's going to come back and bite us. And again, you wish the player all the success, but I'm starting to think that, this is maybe, at the time everyone was excited about that move because obviously shoring up the back end has been a perpetual problem for the Leafs. And I think at the time that was, an answer, a path forward. The defense this year is all sorts of different struggles with injuries and just not looking great. And so I think you see that the struggles we're having on our D-core, what Minten is doing in Boston, the fact that there's a first round pick out there that, thankfully it's protected, but
not only if you finish top 5 though.
Yes.
So
yeah.
We're over here going, well, I hope they finish 6th from last. Because
They will.
Yeah.
They will.
And it's a deep draft this year too. So I mean, like even like 6 to 10, like that's not a great pick to give up either. But like, I mean, thank God it's not like, in the zone where we could potentially be, lottery winners. But yeah, it's tough. Like you never want to give up early on young players, but sometimes you got to make those moves. But ultimately right now, I'm not a huge fan of how it's playing out. But I mean, I think I'm a voice among many with that.
And I'll tell you, Bruins fans already, I think a vast majority feel like the Bruins won that trade because Fraser Minten has become pretty popular here.
Yeah.
Like him right away.
If the Leafs won the cup last year, then, it would have been worth it and they would have won the trade, and that's honestly, they were a contender and Carlo was, one of the few missing pieces they needed to address. And it is, it's the price you pay. So Bruins 365, Habs 365. Leafs 365, Hockey 365. I think I may have manifested Red Wings 365 for you earlier. But all of those Mike has written, and they're all available to read. When I get my hands on some, I know that for sure. So, Mike, thank you very much for joining us.
Mike,
we appreciate it.
Before you go, like, where are they available? I assume Amazon. For this book, anywhere else people should be going?
Yeah, anywhere where you like to buy books, you can probably find it there. So again, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Again, if you're in Canada, like Indigo has them. So pretty much anywhere. Again, if you like to also support your independent bookseller and they don't have it, they can order it in for you as well by working directly with our publisher. So
awesome. Well, thank you, Mike. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks a lot, Mike.
No,
we'll
thank you.
We'll be in touch.
Okay. Thanks again.
All right.
Take care.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.